Jensen, who happens to be a pretty big name in the stock market world, is a pretty amazing CEO, and I think an inspiration for a lot of the Asian community out there, especially the business community. You know, in our last episode, we talked a lot about the idea of getting buy-in from your significant other. We talked about some stories around how with your project, when you first started, that we needed to have some kind of agreement, right, in what we were doing, and also the things that I've done and failed, right? There was some kind of agreement that had to happen there. I think we were thinking about talking about other things until this kind of like viral quote from Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA.
Yeah.
I think maybe this was last week. We're recording this in the middle of March sometime, right?
So recent.
Yeah, so recently he put this out there, and it was basically him talking to a bunch of Stanford MBA students. And I always, maybe this is because I never wanted to go get an MBA, but I always loved seeing these like CEOs owning these like graduate students in the way they talk to them. So Steve Jobs very famously did that to a bunch of MIT students when he was like, if you're bankers or consultants, we don't need more of you in the world. Basically, we need more engineers and people in manufacturing. And I think this was a very kind of similar clip. So why don't we just like take a look at this clip really quick, and we can get sort of our secondary reaction to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of my great advantages is that I have very low expectations. And I mean that. Most of the Stanford graduates have very high expectations. You deserve to have high expectations because you came from a great school. You were very successful. You're top of your class. Obviously, you were able to pay for tuition. And then you're graduating from one of the finest institutions on the planet. You're surrounded by other kids that are just incredible. You naturally have very high expectations. People with very high expectations have very low resilience. And unfortunately, resilience matters in success. I don't know how to teach it to you, except for I hope suffering happens to you. And I was fortunate that I grew up with my parents providing a condition for us to be successful on the one hand, but there were plenty of opportunities for setbacks and suffering. And to this day, I use the phrase pain and suffering inside our company with great glee. And the reason, and I mean that, boy, this is going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. And I mean that in a happy way, because you want to refine the character of your company. You want greatness out of them. And greatness is not intelligence. Greatness comes from character. And character is informed out of smart people. It's formed out of people who suffered. And so that's it. And so if I could wish upon you, I don't know how to do it. For all of you Stanford students, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering.
Okay, so there's like obviously a lot to unpack in that clip, but what was the? I think I texted this to you. Right,
yeah, it was. I think it was in a tweet that you.
Yeah, that's right. It was a guy who was kind of talking about how soft everyone is these days, but I there's many things you can take out of it. So what did you take out of that clip? Your initial reaction, and then maybe as you processed it and started to get more into like culture. Did your thoughts about it change at all?
Well, even though I'm not a student and I'm not young anymore, I still felt like his clip, what he said was, speaking to me as someone who is trying to embark on the entrepreneurial journey. And I felt what he said is something that you can't really say that you understand until you go through it, right? And there is the going through the pain and suffering is building characters, like he said, and how you respond to those things will kind of inform yourself and the people around you as you embark on the journey, how you're gonna deal with problems that arise and how you will do in the end, really, right? So I felt like what he said is something that we say a lot in social media, in conversations we have, but I also know that in reality, how many of us are willing to purposely put ourselves in these pain and suffering situations and be happy about it. I don't think there's a lot of people, actually, even though I think a lot of us think we are or want to be that way. I just don't think it's a lot of people. And there is definitely a difference in goals, having goals for yourself, and then having expectations for yourself, right? And
right. That's interesting. So unpack that a little bit. So what are so like, you know, it can be kind of jarring, right, to hear that from someone. I can't imagine how many people's butts like puckered up when they heard him, because he paused for like a really long time after he said, like, you know, you need to have people with high expectations have low resilience. He just stopped for like, it felt like a minute, right? But I've like unpacked that idea of expectations versus sort of goals.
Yeah, and how
because they can be kind of
translates to
conflated sometimes, you know?
and how all that relates to resilience, right?
Yeah.
I think having goals is kind of task or milestone oriented. You have a goal for yourself, and then you set out to do everything you need to do to achieve it. But I think expectation is like the emotion that comes behind the goals, with the goals, right? So, you know, for like you said, if you're high achieving, you've done well for yourself all throughout your life, you know, it's like whether you're a student, a student, or whether you're a performer in a corporate company, there is this certain expectation that you do good work and people respect you for the work that you do, and you pat yourself on your back, right? Because of course you should, because you've done a great job. So then you kind of carry that expectation into many other things that you do, right? It's like, you know, just basic example, right? If you are a manager at a consulting company, you make this amount, you know, X amount of salary, you kind of expect yourself to have certain type of house, certain type of car,
Right.
and all that is the expectation manifested in the things you have achieved, right? Which is, I think, different than goal, because, you know, some people with that kind of job, their goal might not be those things. Their goal might be take care of the family and have a giant, you know, retirement account for later. So goals and expectations,
Yeah.
slightly different, but I think maybe two different sides of the same coin.
There's like an emotional feeling and attachment to like a goal almost, right? And honestly, in my opinion, that's entitlement. Like the idea of having expectations is
You expect that you
expect
have
that
it.
you should hit that goal.
Oh, yeah,
And if you
yes.
don't hit that goal, like someone did something to you or something, you know, it was bad luck or whatever, but like there's a sort of cognitive dissonance that happens when you're like, I should have been here and I'm not here. And some people react to that very differently, right?
Well, I think anybody who sets a goal for themselves will never think, I'm not going to achieve this goal.
Yeah.
Right? But that happens so often, right? We set a goal for ourselves, and then, you know, along the way, we learn more things. We figure out maybe our goal was kind of a bad goal to
That's
begin
right.
with.
Yeah, it could be the wrong goal.
Could be the wrong goal, right? And then your expectation kind of changes after that. And I think with those changes, there's like the emotional thing that comes with it, right? Like Jensen said, he probably takes those in stride and say, oh, we're going to change direction or change goals. We manage our expectations. Then he probably, you know, doesn't pause and think twice about it. He
It's
just
part of the culture.
just
Like
goes,
just
right?
expect that things are going to change. They're going to be hard. You're going to be asked to do things that may seem impossible, right? But if you're not of that, like if you don't have that mindset, this is not the right place for you.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's also, I can see, you know, I will say I'll put myself in the second camp that I'm learning to be jumping on the first ship, right? And I think I'm getting much better about it. But the second camp of people, I'll say, when that happens, they immediately feel like they have failed fail themselves or fail
it's
people around them.
Beat up on yourself.
Yeah, and they have failed to meet maybe other people and themselves' expectations.
Sure.
So they kind of feel bad about themselves. They kind of start doubting things that they're doing. The result of that, like they might, go do a bunch of other tasks or things that they think will help.
Yeah. Busy
Will
work.
steer the goal or change or like will inform you something more to tell you what to do next. And then, you kind of get into a frenzy of like, let's do this and let's do that. But a lot of the times those things are probably not helpful to achieve the end vision that you have or whatever.
Yeah. When I first saw that clip, like it definitely said like, it gave me goosebumps because I was like, man, and even the things he was saying before that clip, I know there's a bunch of people out there who watched that clip and you probably got some goosebumps too because you have experienced what he's talking about. And I remember when I first started doing this, I had like no resilience at all, like very low resilience and actually very high expectations, right? And so I remember quitting the consulting job. They didn't really start a company. I was just like a freelance sort of consultant at the time. And when we got involved in the music business, right, with 6am, we started building a business. We started building a product, our events and things like that. And that was like truly my first kind of go at like starting something. And I remember like going through that whole process and there was this one event we did we were doing music festivals in Asia. And to promote the music festival and the lead up to the festival, we would do these like non-music events. So like a sunrise 5K run or like a trash pickup on the beach or whatever. We had to invest in like the 5K, for example. And I just remember like I'm about to fly out to Asia to like lead this event. And like our ticket, there's no way we're going to make up ticket sales to be able to cover the cost for this event. I think I calculated, I was like, oh man, we're like in the hole for like 20 grand right now. And this is on like a budget of like 20 grand, and like on the total budget of 20 grand, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like we just did not sell enough tickets and not get enough sponsorship and all those sorts of things. And I remember like I had a panic attack, right? I just like I remember, I didn't even realize it was a panic attack at the time, but I realized after the fact I had a panic attack because I was like, oh my God, we're going to lose all this money. I'd never lost that much money before. Right. Mm-hmm. And now I look back on it, like I've definitely lost more money than that. Right. But I just remember how low my resilience was. I just like melted down. I remember just being like a nervous wreck on the 12-hour plane ride over there. Mm-hmm. Right. Usually when you get in there, you're in game time mode and you execute it. But we executed it. We lost the money. And I remember I remember when he said that quote, I remember thinking back to that instance where I just like kind of melted down a little bit. And then I realized I melted down because I thought that we should have made money at that event. But we had never done an event like that. We had never done festival in Asia. We had never worked with these partners before.
So that's your expectation.
That was my expectation
because you felt like the amount of work and
the planning I did, I was organized.
That went into it should give you the results that you expected.
Yeah. And I think the point that is made, and I think the topic of what we're trying to talk about today is that like having resilience is probably one of the most important things when it comes to trying to build a company, because you're going to fall on your face and it's going to hurt, right? And I think the idea of resilience is, do you get back up again? Mm-hmm. And do you get back into that mode of, hey, I got to iterate, I got to keep improving. It's kind of like the Kobe Bryant thing we talked about last time, where he's like, whether you win or lose, you got to do the same thing the next day, And so I think when people have really high resilience, it's because they're not looking to the future about what they should get, right? Now there's a goal that they're moving towards, but they don't feel like they could. My mindset is I could very easily meet that goal, or I could actually fail at it, and that both of those are possible outcomes, right? And I think it's hard to adjust your mindset to do that when you have been in an environment where you've always won, basically.
Right.
You don't know how to lose if you've always won.
Right, for sure. So when we say, resilience and all that stuff, right, I think it's it's definitely something that's easier said than done.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
And I don't
of
think.
course, you should get back up when you fail something. Like, what else can you do, right? But how come some people do it, some people don't, right? And I think that the mindset is a huge thing when it comes to that, right? And like you said, if somebody has failed many times and their mindset is like, this is just something that happens, no big deal, you move on, right? So it's kind of like the mindset like when you fail, the first few seconds or, first few hours when you find out about it, what do you do about it, right?
And for sure, there's a grieving process. Like when you fail at something big, there's going to be like, it's going to maybe take hours or days to get over that, right? If it's something small, hopefully, like in our daily life, like someone cuts you off, are you going to go yell at your kid all day because someone cut you off, And like
some people do.
Yeah, but that's the resilience that needs to be built.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So in this case, like the resilience we're talking about, it's not even like...
it's not like running a marathon.
Yeah, it's not about like,
physical.
how long you can keep it going, so to speak. It's more like how fast you change your mindset so that you keep going.
I actually think it's like, when you think about like resilience in this context, it's about how you react, and you're going to have these feelings. There's no way you can control them. You're going to be angry, you're going to be sad, you're going to be depressed. But it's like, how do you just ignore them and move on? Right? You don't indulge them. You don't, right? It's just like, what can you learn from this? And do you go back into a hole and start crying to yourself about it, right? Or and a lot of people hate to hear this term, but it's like, do you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just get going?
I think I would argue against that, actually. I think the fact that, like you say, there are these grieving periods where you allow yourself to be in that emotion, you're already kind of one step back away from the journey of the resilience, right? I think the key point is here is like, when you have those emotions, you are already having expectation. The emotion is a result of those expectations, right? So I think the key here actually is how do you get yourself to the point when even when all those things happens, you don't even have those emotions.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's just all outcome of any business decision you make, it's all possible, right? It's kind of an even spread. So if you react towards success one way,
right,
why should you react towards, quote unquote, failure another way? It should be the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I want to add that a lot of times when we do allow ourselves to get in those emotional spaces, you're wasting time and energy to feel those way, while you can spend those time and energy on coming up with the solutions to solve your problem.
Right.
And B, I feel like when you are in those emotions, it's just going to make the next time when something happens easier for you to get into the emotions again. Because, neural path, whatever, neuroplasticity, if you're always mad about something, the next time you experience the same thing, you got to feel mad again. Then again, more time wasted on the next round.
Yep.
Right. So, and I think that's like the really, really hard thing to do for most people, is how to not even feel the emotions. Right. And I think, for the past few years, our just mainstream media, our society has allowed so much emotion
it's just
to come into everything we do, right?
We focus too much on our, and I always say this, like, I'm always the proponent for mental health, right? Make sure you take care of your head, you'll operate better, like all those things. Well, I think we listened to a podcast about this recently, right? Where they were kind of talking about, if you just indulge these like really bad feelings all the time, like therapy, like you're gonna always feel bad if all you're talking about is bad feelings. Right. And so that kind of makes sense. I get that you have to, if you haven't talked about it, you gotta talk about it. And in any high performing team and functioning team, you talk about it and you squash it and you move on. But you don't indulge that idea like over and over and over and over and over again. And I feel like Jensen kind of talking about this, there's been some talk about CEOs have kind of taken like a little harder stance, right? And I hate to use like this word woke, gets thrown around all this time, but, and that can be a triggering word for a lot of people. But the idea, I think, is that, we just need to build more resilient people. And going back to your question before all this, which was like, how do you actually, it's easier said than done. The way you do it is you keep putting yourself in hard situations. And
That's
then,
literally the only way.
and then to your point, when you're in those situations, just have the mindset that your initial reaction to it, that feeling, you probably need to pull it back, like repress it a little bit. Because that's the act of now not feeling entitled, right? Like you're starting that process. So it's like, you can't teach someone resilience. You have to put them into a situation that will require it. But more importantly, you putting them, they may react to that and pull up even more, right?
Both are possible, 100%.
But to your point, what you're saying is like, if you actually want to become more resilient when you're in those situations, you got to stop that. Oh my God, this is too hard. Oh my God, like I'm never going to do this. Oh my God, I just failed. Oh my God, I'm terrible. Like the thought is going to pop into your mind, but you literally have to tell yourself like, dude, you're got to stop thinking that. And I know that in my own journey that I find my Koya, our daughter, like when I'm driving her to school, she'll be like, are you talking to yourself, Daddy? And I'm like, yeah, I actually am talking to myself, because that's my technique that I use to like undo my own thinking. Because by default in your brain, you're going to think a certain way, but the words that come out of your mouth when you say them almost contradicts what your mind is thinking. And that's like how you start to change your behavior, I think, on these very ingrained things.
Yeah.
But you have to be in the situation first to even give yourself the chance to practice that.
Yeah. So I feel like, in the beginning you said that clip made you cringe. And
No. It did not make me cringe. It made me
uncomfortable.
It was inspiring, but also made me uncomfortable too.
Why is that?
It was inspiring because it was a very good reflection of my own experience, and said things became easier as I got more resilient.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Right? I'm doing harder things, but they're easier now because I'm more resilient.
Yeah.
So that was the inspiring part of it, but the cringe part of it is like, as like an age, like my parents, just like your parents immigrated, from another country. They were first generation immigrants. And I feel like in our youth and growing up, and we all have different experiences, obviously, but our parents are like, you got to be the best, right? And it's like a measuring stick. Like they have this measuring stick of what the best is.
In their own minds.
In their own minds, right? And it's a lot of it's education, good grades,
money,
money, status, like those things. And so I look at that and I'm like, okay, like a lot of actually what he was talking against was what my parents sort of like, you're the best, you're good, you're smart, you're going to do good, you go to a good school. And I kind of was like, but maybe that's not how I actually want to teach my daughter, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Right. And so like, I kind of was like, and I felt bad for the students who were in there, because they kind of like, to achieve that, you have to Stanford MBA program. That's like a lifelong achievement. But in the world of where they're going to go next, becoming titans of industry or startups or whatever, like you haven't even been born yet, dude. You're like still in the womb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that clip was great. Like I understood what he was saying, and I, take it with a stride now. And obviously, what I mentioned, the first 20 minutes of when something bad happens, like I'm still working on that, right?
Right.
That time is getting shorter. But I actually thought I'm putting myself in the students' shoes.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I still thought it was an inspiring clip.
If you're that kind of person.
Sure. But as a student, I probably don't even know what pain and suffering really means.
Right.
Especially if you go to Stanford, right? So you actually don't even know what that even means. So I feel like for this clip to make a more serious impact on the students, I don't know how much impact it will make on the students.
Yeah. And let me give you an example of pain and suffering at a junior level, kind of entrepreneur. level. So like, I think a big step for a lot, you hire your first W-2 employees, you're paying payroll taxes, you're doing, what you should do as a business. And I remember like, you got to kind of hire ahead of revenue, and that's why you have capital and lines of credit, but no startup company gets that off the bat. Right. So I just remember like we had our first couple of employees and we were short on payroll in the company bank account.
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay. I still need to pay myself out of it and this and that. And so I just remember like I had to wire money from our personal bank account because I needed to get there. I couldn't write a check.
Right.
Because I needed our payroll account to be funded. I couldn't switch the payroll account. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
So I just remember like writing a check or not wiring money into our payroll account. And then I was like, oh shit, we have to make our credit card payment like this month. And we always pay our credit card. We don't carry a balance on our credit cards. And so at that one time I was like, oh my God, do I have to carry a balance this month on my credit card?
Right.
And in my family, I was like paying 18% APR is like a mortal sin. You know what I mean? And I was like, shit, I have to carry the balance this month. Right. Cause I can't pay the whole balance down. And I remember being so stressed out about that, right? And like, it was like such a small example of like this like hardship that you have to. It's the stress that comes from it, right?
Right.
And and now like smarter, we have lines of credit and things like that, where if things get dicey, we can always pull on them. But back then, that was like the end of the world, you know. And it was. There's a lot of these stories that I think everyone out there has. That as you experience them more, you kind of have that oh shit moment less.
Yeah, for sure. Because and I'm sure the problems you deal with are much bigger than that now. So you probably still get oh shit for like something probably much bigger.
But like even like so we ski a lot, right? And the great thing about skiing is being able to challenge yourself and do things that are kind of scary. And when you get down off of it, like you accomplish something. And but once you get to a certain level, right? Nothing seems that steep anymore. It's like, okay, this is steeper than normal, but my heart's fluttering a little bit.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? But you get to a level where like that oh shit moment is only like this big instead of like this big.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, first time going from green to blue was like, oh my God, this is so steep, right? Then the first time going from blue to black, that's like it's like a amount of fear you had to get down. You had to get over to just be okay with going down, right? But after that, like black and double black, it just like...
Yeah, or riding a traverse to go down it. It's like, you still feel nervous. You still feel kind of scared, but it's like for a split second, and then it goes away. Whereas before, you're like, am I going to go down this thing?
And I think before, for a person who is used to ski blue, they might not even attempt black.
That's right.
Right? But then, this past time, I just recently started skiing black, and then we went down a double black, and I got stuck on a cliff and had to like take out both skis and then basically slide down half the cliff.
Yeah.
While Andrew has to like secure my ski, right?
Yep.
But that was like the scariest. It was scary, but we went down and I was like,
okay,
we're going it.
The next cliff you look down, it'll be like, okay, this is still kind of, because when I looked down that thing too, I was like, all right, this is not fun, right? Like I kind of was like, all right, this is not going to be that fun. This is not a good idea. It's like, okay, we just got to get down it.
Yeah.
You commit to it and you go.
Yeah.
But next time you will commit and go.
Yeah.
Right?
But for a person who skis blue, they will probably never attempt that.
Yeah.
Right. So I found that was an interesting point, because once you do enough of these things, then they just
so
kind of plateaus.
It's much easier to do hard things again. Right?
Yeah.
But you got to do hard things first, and you got to work your way up to that.
Yeah.
And most people never give themselves, like you said, the chance. They'll never leave a blue. We have so many friends that will never leave a blue slope.
Right.
Even if I'll tell them, you know what, you should try to ride this black today. It snowed a lot and it's not as steep.
Yeah.
But there's too much powder and this and that. It's like, find every excuse not to give yourself that opportunity to build that resilience, you know? And it's funny, like the friends that we like to ski and snowboard with, like they're definitely the kind of people that
will take a chance.
They want to take a chance, and they see it as a challenge, and I see how they do it in their careers and their lives. And it's a mindset thing, right? And so that's, again, like in the context of everything going on in the world right now, like, I just thought that was a really interesting perspective from someone who's, everyone is paying attention to him right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of what NVIDIA is doing.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that was, little tough love he gave to the students. I felt like it was, personally speaking, I felt like it was like a tough love for everyone, really, not just the students,
society.
right?
Yeah,
society
let's buck up. Like, we used to have this saying. It's and you hear it in the military, but it's like when I was a trainer in Taekwondo, like we were pretty like beat up basically. But you just have this saying: you have to enjoy the suck.
Yeah,
you got to learn to love it when it sucks. Just give me more.
Yeah.
Right?
So, what are like some things that like has helped you in running the business when something like that happens, that kind of help mindset or techniques that you have to kind of help you get through the mentalness of suck?
I always have trouble answering these questions because they're so like multifaceted in what you have to do, and it's almost like stop being anxious.
Right.
How do you stop being anxious?
Right.
There's a lot of therapy and all these things you can talk about, but ultimately, like, how do you stop being anxious? And in a lot of ways, like, how do you build more resilience is kind of almost the same question.
Yeah.
So like, I look at it in a really holistic way. There's no silver bullets to these things. So first off is health, like physical health. I was literally just talking to my brother today, and he's younger than me, but like, I asked him to go skiing. Jeremy, you're younger than me, and you're like scared that it's going to snow like 8 inches because you're not in shape. That's not a good thing, dude. But when I think about health, it's a lot easier to be resilient if your body is strong, and if you eat right. And obviously, like, you go to the airport now, and there's like a protein bar, right? It's literally the name of the restaurant, right? And I think we've all, with modern health and nutrition, have understood that you treat your body well, you'll think better, you'll be stronger mentally, physically. And I actually think it has a lot to do with resilience, because if you're fucking hungry all the time and you're not eating right, like, you're going to melt down very easily.
Right.
And some people have the vice of going to food and things like that when things are bad.
Yeah.
But you've got to work out and you've got to eat well, right? And you've got to sleep. And that's something that I can never do all three things. I'm not sleeping now, but I'm eating okay and I'm working out. But I think that's one component of building resilience.
Yeah, so self-care. So
your mind and body has got to be strong.
Yeah. So to have resilience, you kind of have to have a strong base to go on, right?
Yeah.
And your body and mind is literally the only base you have. If you don't talk about, your bank account, whatever, like your body as a person is like all you got to leave the world with, pretty much, right?
And for all the entrepreneurs who are parents out there, like kind of like Lisi said, like, you almost have like a full tank of gas, or some of us may start the day with a half tank of gas, right? And like, you're a partner, you're in a relationship, that person takes from your gas too. They also add to it. Some days they add to it, some days they take away from it, because that's all part of a relationship, right? You coexist together like that. But when you have kids, that's like one more thing that is most likely going to be taking a lot of gas out of the tank in the beginning. And then I think as we all get better as parents, like experiencing these moments with your kids adds to the tank, right? But for sure, I feel like, at least for me in the beginning, they were taking a lot more than giving to it, right? And still,
I think that's probably going to go on for the rest of their life.
Yeah, of course, right? But I think when you have that energy and you have the gas in the tank, like, you can be resilient. There's no way you can be resilient with zero gas in the tank.
Yeah.
Right? And to learn how to do it, you need to have some gas, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, like, kind of like we just talked about, like, number 2 would be realizing when you're not being resilient and kind of like being a baby, and then kind of giving yourself the tough love to be like, hey, I literally tell myself, dude, stop doing this. That's like, I'll literally be in the car driving myself, like, and I'll be like catastrophizing or doing all these crazy things, and I'll literally just say, dude, you're doing this right now, stop. And like, you look like a crazy person because you're talking to yourself, but it's like almost having a second person that you trust saying to yourself, like, you're doing this thing again, and you know you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I call like getting the head and the heart to like align, because a lot of the times there's dissonance between the two. That's your emotions and your logic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of the gap we're trying to close
totally.
in this podcast, especially today's conversation.
Yeah.
I wonder how, in general, how well people take tough love advices.
Not well.
Not well.
I mean, I'm that person, right?
Yeah.
And
because I was just thinking about me too, so I'm glad
most
to
people
hear
don't.
that.
No, most people don't. They want to be
babied.
Yeah, and I, again, we're all a byproduct.
Understood.
Right, and we're a byproduct of, because well, a lot of people don't know about me is that I competed in the Junior Olympics for Taekwondo basically until I was like 16 years old. I went to Colorado Springs to train at the Olympic Training Center. I was actually trying to compete. I was trying to get ready to compete in the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, because that was when Taekwondo was an official medal sport, right? It officially became it was a demonstration sport up until then, but after 2000 and beyond, it became an official medal sport. So the thing about the old school like kind of way of training in Taekwondo is like no one cares about your feelings, right? And if anything, they try to beat your feelings out of you, right? Through suffering, through hardship. I remember at the Olympic Training Center, there's stairs that lead up to one of the Olympic torches, I think, from one of the games. And it's a quite a bit of stairs, right? It's like probably 8 stories. And this is after we ran 5 miles, right? We had to sprint up and down this thing like five or 6 shuttle runs, right? And I just remember, like, because we were at altitude, I didn't realize it. We were all going to pass out. Like, literally, people were just dropping. And the instructor's, like, yelling at you, get up. There's no reason why I don't care if you can't breathe. It doesn't matter if you just get up off the floor and find every ounce of strength you have to get on your feet, right? And if you didn't do it, you had 50 push-ups, right? And I think, like, when you go through those, like, I had a really extreme exposure to that. And so a lot of times when I run into things, I use that tough love sort of thing because it worked for me. The problem is it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I'm wondering, like, why do most people have such like negative reaction towards tough love? Is it because our society and how, the past 50 years of good economy has just made us soft, so we just don't want to hear these things anymore? Or is it because it when we say it's tough loves, and then, like fundamentally, intrinsically, it means it's against what you think.
Yeah.
That's why it's tough love. Right?
Yeah, right.
So I guess, in some ways, shining light on tough love is also shining light on the attitude when there is oppositions to what you value and believe in to begin with.
I feel like tough love comes across as yelling, or it comes across as
criticizing,
and usually it comes across as being really harsh, and maybe harsh isn't the right word, but it's like, and sometimes
it's hard to hear, like things you don't want to hear.
Sometimes there's the subject matter of it, and there's the delivery of it.
Yes. Right?
And so, like, the delivery of it, to me, also builds resilience. You have a drill sergeant just yelling in your ear. The point of that is, can you be composed under pressure?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you don't see that lesson out of it, you're like, the fuck is wrong with this guy?
Yeah. I mean, when us working together, just to be in a relationship, I feel like I've gotten a lot of tough love from Andrew just throughout my life. And, sometimes it leads to fights and stuff because I think in the beginning, like hearing those things, you feel like you are not understood, or like
personal attack.
It's personal. Yeah. It becomes personal. Then it becomes emotional. Right. And then I will, almost trying to find reasons why it was like, I shouldn't listen to it. Was it bad delivery?
This advice is not relevant to me.
Right.
Basically.
Or I will say, like, how you said it was so tough for me to hear that's why I'm having this reaction. Right. But I think, I still do that sometimes, right? But I think in the end, I think in the end, I always listen to his advice because I know he will never advise me something bad or ill, or, at least it's to his best ability, right? So I should at least give it a listen. But a lot of times you can vent to people and people will like try to make you feel better. That's and then, wrap you up in a warm blanket so that you can go on. Or you can have a sergeant that just slap you in the face and be like, get up and go, or you're gone.
And there's nothing wrong with the other group of people. It's just, and look, the people I surround myself with are generally like that kind of people. They're like, hey, dude, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not smart. Or, like they're very direct. We have kind of our own views on the world. We may agree and disagree, but, and again, in society today, like that idea of tough love is like, it's almost, now people are saying like, that's a very masculine thing and all this stuff. But the reality of it is like, look, sometimes we get advice from people. We want to go to people who we know will listen to their advice. Yeah. So if someone's giving you tough love and you don't want to listen to it, then don't listen,
You know what's funny? When you said that, my immediate reactions, I think tough love advice are, in my mind, given out by Asian tiger moms.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And white old males. I don't know why, but those things popped up to me probably because
the tiger mom thing for sure. Yeah, that's right.
Right. I was like, I've definitely gotten my fair share of tough love advice from my mom, and to what you just said, even though there's two ways of approaching it, I find that if somebody takes the tough love approach and actually change something about themselves or like do something different, that has a much long-lasting, life-changing effects. When you are, being wrapped in a warm blanket and you feel, because that you feel better about yourself, then you get up and go do the thing again, it's kind of likely that you'll repeat the same mistake because you did not learn what you did wrong and quote unquote suffered from it, right? Because I think at the end of the day, no matter what happens, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you got to do whatever thing again. Whether you got tough love the day before and go do it, or, got showered by hugs and loves and then you wake up next day to go do it, right? Either way, you got to go do it. I think everybody will probably want the warm blanket approach, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because that just, today's society, that just, it's a feel good point. It feels good for the person who's giving the hug.
You need the dopamine hit, and like.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think that makes you a tougher person in the end. I think if you got yelled at and then, wiped your tears and got up next day and go do it, that will have some longer lasting effects.
If the person is like giving you tough love and like, that's all they're giving you, that's like abuse. You know what I mean? But the point is that they give you tough love, but then after that's done and you take it to heart, like they should help you.
Yeah.
Like figure that out. Yeah. Right. And like that it's not in the moment, it's tough love.
Yeah.
Right. In that statement from Jensen. And in fact, even the All In podcast, right? We listened to that a lot, and they talked about that clip on the podcast.
Right.
And Friedberg, I thought he recently went back to becoming like a CEO from an investor to a CEO, and he sounded like really happy. You know what I mean? Like he sounded genuinely happy to be back in that seat, like working on problems, like as opposed to like analyzing companies, meeting with founders, dealing with legal things. Like that's what you do as an investor, right?
Right.
But when I was hearing him talk about that clip. And how he kind of said, like, when people ask me about starting a company, the first thing I tell them is, don't start a company.
Don't do it.
That's tough love. That's straight up tough love.
Right.
Oh, you're awesome. The other side of it is, you're awesome. You did so good at this. You're really creative. You're really organized. Yeah. That's shitty love to me when it comes to entrepreneurship. The tough love is like, yo, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Like, do you know how much this is going to suck? Do you know how much you're going to question yourself? Do you know how much like that? And then so someone to me could be like, why are you so negative, Andrew? Shouldn't you dream more? It's like, dude, I'm a fucking entrepreneur. Of course I'm dreaming, but there's got to be some realism done to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the tough love that I think a lot of people have to have. But most people, when I talk to them about in their early stage, I'm like, hey, are you ready to like dump more money into this, or time, or effort, or teach yourself a skill, or do something to get this moving forward? Because you can't just work on product. You can't just do sales. You can't, you've got to do more, you know?
So I think tough love is true love, is honest love, right? And I think
so. And delivered in the right way, right? Like,
sure.
In a way that's palatable, or at least can be digested by the person.
But then if from the receiving end, if the person has resilience, then they should just take the content out of that conversation and kind of leave the tone or whatever on the table, right? Because the person that's giving you the love is taking the time telling you this and sharing what their experience have taught them with you. So that act in itself is kind of selfless already, right? Yeah. So everything else should not be part of your receiving end. You should just take the advice and then kind of think about how you should take it.
And this almost like the person giving you the advice should be good. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who can give tough love, but bad advice.
That's true,
so that's
too.
Kind of we're assuming that you've picked the right person to get the tough love from. They know what you're talking about.
Right. Very important.
But it's so weird. Like, when we all come into circumstances where someone tells us something that's contrary to what we believe, or contrary to what we hold true, or right. And it's always interesting. I see this happen. I try to observe this a little bit more in my own behavior, which is like, okay, someone just said something to me that I don't agree with, and it's pretty jarring, but don't say anything back. Just like, how are you reacting to this kind of?
Right.
And sometimes I kind of like, it's like I kind of give a blank stare back, or I'm pausing a little bit more. But I know that when there's this, again, I use the word cognitive dissonance between like expectations for, Elon's formulas, happiness is expectations minus reality, right? Like that's the key. That's the key to happiness. Expectations equals reality, right? And any gap in between that, or surplus for that matter, right, is more happiness or sadness. Essentially. And I realize that when someone says something to me that goes, that your pricing is fucked, like you didn't present the brand well enough, you didn't like your whatever, and I'm like, reaction. Try to stop for 1 second and be like, okay, well, how am I just ask yourself, how are you reacting to this? Observe, basically. And then you can maybe say, okay, I'm negative reacting, but at least you see it. And even me, like, it's not even tough love. It's just getting feedback that you don't want to hear, basically. And I think all of us can just, instead of reacting to be like, well, this is why I did it, or this is the reason why it has to be this way, because that's literally my first reaction when I'm trying to defend my point.
Right.
Is it like stop and just like, okay, what are you doing right now? And are you actually listening? Number one. And then number two is like, okay, then you can maybe figure out how to reply. But I feel like going through that and restraining yourself a little bit from your initial reaction does help build resilience too.
But that also shows that you're also aware of this happening already, which is kind of the step one to everything we talked about today, right? If you think you're doing great and then you don't even think you need anybody's advice, and everything we say today, you're probably gonna think it's like, I don't need to listen to this. We're kind of in that same, back at the same start. So for anybody to even like be open to even consider this, you kind of have to be aware of where you are with that mental.
I call it like having an out of body experience. You almost have to like, it's like the ghost comes out of you and you're like watching yourself doing this thing, and you're kind of like, in Buddhism and things like that, like a lot of these concepts. And when I was younger, I read all these books on Buddhism. Like, I have no idea what these people are saying. But as I've kind of grown up and gone through these experiences, I'm like, this is a thing that has happened since like the beginning, like thousands of since the beginning of time.
And you can't have that experience, the out of body objective experience, if you're emotional at the time.
You gotta be self-aware. You gotta be, you can like it's okay to be emotional, but it's like the key is to be self-aware of your emotions.
Yeah.
And then you can start to manage them. Because
Right.
the emotions never go away.
Right.
It's just about how you react to them and I think manage them. And that I think is, kind of going back to this whole thing is why people don't have a lot of resilience is because maybe we give too much credence to the emotions sometimes.
I think
number
so,
one.
yeah.
But number two is like, sometimes we just need to be self-aware enough to be like, hey, this is just emotion.
Yeah.
Like just let go and like let it pass, these bad feelings pass through you, but it has no implications for who I am, what I'm doing, who I'm working with, whatever. It's just, these are just emotions.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, these are all like very non-business things, but I feel like it's important because running a business is all about mindset, to be honest.
And Jensen said it matters in business.
I think so.
Having resilience matters if you're doing business, large or small, anything, right? Having a job, like your resilience is kind of like, how long can you go on?
You're like in a box. You're like in a vacuum sealed box.
Yeah.
And then when you are an entrepreneur, it's like now you're in the real world.
Yeah.
You got to go hunt and kill for yourself.
Yeah. And I think, being an artist myself has built so much resilience in me because I feel like just to even call yourself that and choose that path to go on.
Yeah.
Literally everything's against you. The narrative,
the stereotype of the starving
stereotype, and the self, the how hard you're on yourself. Most artists are, I feel like,
more so than business people for sure, because it's such a subjective. Business is objective. Like you make money, you make profit, you make a margin, or you don't.
Yeah.
With art, like this could be beautiful to you, but the person you want to like it or buy it doesn't love it.
Yes, and I see this in so many artists who are hobbyist artists who are so good, but won't take that step of making it into a business because even taking that step, you're putting yourself out there for
someone to say like that sucks or no one's gonna buy it.
For judgment that you're being judged all day, every day, whether you realize it or not, right? And then once you're in that world, you kind of compare your own art with other people's art. So then you're judging yourself because there's always better artists out there than you and do better work. It's a judge, right? And then the third thing is the asking people for money for something that you created from 0 to 1, right?
All creatives,
and then even, for me, like I'll put out a collection, it sells out. Next one I put out crickets, right? And then third one you put out, it does well again. So it's like constant up and down on this journey of self-doubt. And then, if you're resilient and you keep going, you grow thicker skin. And that's why the saying is growing thicker skin. But in the end, it's about resilience and how fast you can keep going to do the next thing and then how well you do the next thing from the things you learned.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, some people cringe when I say this, but it's to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you got knocked down and number one, learn from it. Yeah. Right. But number two, it's like the next time it won't be as hard to knock you down.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. And have no expectations. I know it's really hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, the other question, the third thing I wanted to say about how do you build resilience is don't have expectations.
Yeah. So then
have goals.
Have goals.
But just know that, hey, like there's a lot of things that stand in between me and these goals. Yeah. Most of us are going to set high goals for ourselves because we're type A
as
and
we should,
overachievers.
and anybody, and as you should dream, right?
But yeah, you just set yourself up for so much failure when you're like, I'm going to get it done, And I think, like, again, I look at Kobe as a competitor, and he wasn't my favorite basketball player, but he's my favorite, like, person, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And when I look at just how he was, like, he never expected to win, right? He wanted to win, and he had a desire, and that was his motivation for working as hard, showing up at 4 a.m, and then doing 3 days or 4 days, even after a game, right? He used that winning as a motivation, but it wasn't the end goal. Right. Right? He didn't expect. I got Shaq, I got Derek, I got all these people on my team. We should win the championship, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think he ever had that mindset. And like, that's why everyone says it's like Mamba mentality and all this other stuff. Like the it's like, that's why was such an inspirational person.
Yeah.
You know, he's a tough dude. Like,
Yeah.
he's like, same thing with Tiger, right? Those kind of people they're tough people. One word answers, like kind of snide remarks back. The reporters hated interviewing Tiger, you know?
Yeah.
To be excellent, you kind of have to have, now that's a whole other extreme, but we can learn a lot from that. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And then I kind of realized, well, not having expectation. And the other thing that you mentioned made me realize was, and then when you do have expectation, like, are these your expectations or other people's expectations that of you? Huge difference. And that kind of will change everything.
And that is another layer
Yeah.
of crap that if you fall into that trap, like now you have two holes to dig out of in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess, you know, after this part of the conversation, we realized like tough love in general is just good advice. And
I think so.
you should listen and don't let your own emotions and all that kind of, you know, protect yourself from growing and from listening to those tough love, because I think that's also human nature to want to be, you know, keep ourselves away from danger and negative things. And
the whole cliche, the things that taste the bad, the worst for you, or probably
like
the
best
most healthy for
yeah.
you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
you know, I don't think that changes as time goes on.
Yeah. So I think a lot of things we talked about today is kind of, you know, people say it all the time, but we kind of like peeled it apart to see.
Yeah, I think we dug
really
deeper onto this concept, and in the world today, it's kind of a touchy subject for some people.
Yeah.
But I think if we're gonna talk about being an entrepreneur and starting a business and doing those things, like absolutely resilience, self-awareness, those kind of things are just, I think they're prerequisites. But no one starts with it.
Right.
You have to build it. And
right.
That's almost the first test. You know.
Yeah, it's true. So if you know,
don't think about cash flow, P&L, like all the other stuff. Like, can I take a beating and get back up again and get back up stronger?
Yeah. Or I guess for, you know, people who are starting on this journey, like have goals, you know,
for sure,
but know that you're gonna get beat down along the way many times before you kind of figure it out. So take the emotions out of it as much as you can. I know it's impossible to not have any, but
if you keep hitting your goals in a way, like you're not setting high enough goals.
Yeah, that's exactly. Who said that?
I think it was we read it in the Elon book. He said something about like we need to have a better we should be shooting past this specific standard.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you're always achieving your goals and meeting your own expectation, then, you know,
you got to raise the resistance.
You can probably do more, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And
you should always be doing harder things than you think you can be doing.
Yeah. And I think it's just a general good advice for life. Like if you magical things happen when you're outside of your comfort zone, right? So when you're feeling uncomfortable, when you feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, what is this?
Just literally tell yourself, that's the sign that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. It's tough when you're going through that, though, because
you got to just say it out loud. Like, hey, this sucks, but I got to do this.
Yeah. And I've, have gone through many cycles of that in my life, right? Especially with art. Like every time I feel like I hate what I'm doing, this doesn't look like what I'm doing. And then
there's a breakthrough.
I watch few YouTube videos. I talk to people about it, and then I practice more. And then once you get over that hump, you're like, oh, this feels so great. And I feel like that's kind of I think that's kind of the antidote to happiness in life, when you give yourself challenges and then overcoming them. And then
when you can enjoy the suck.
Yeah.
Like,
and
that's when you know you've made it.
Yeah.
You know
and then overcome it, and then kind of learn and grow from it. And then you kind of like, a new person, and just keep on doing that. And I think that's how you keep, have a happy life, so to speak. Because I can't think of any instances where a person was doing the same thing over day in and day out and is like completely satisfied with life. Right. So I think that,
or at least in their mind, you're right. Like eventually those people who are like, something is not right.
Yeah. Well, that's why I use the word satisfied instead of happy.
Yeah. Right.
Like they might be happy, but life is too short to like not be satisfied with what you're doing. And I think that satisfaction
It's more important than happiness in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, yeah, exactly. So you kind of just gotta take those humps and then know that once you get over the hump, you'll be a much better person. And then the other thing about entrepreneurship is like there's never gonna be an end of the hump. You kind of just kind of keep on going, right?
Until you sell the company.
Yeah.
You're just like,
or you die. Like
I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And there's definitely going to become a day where I'm just like tired of all of this.
Yeah.
But I know that every day is going to have a different problem, and that's just my life.
Yeah.
And so that's just normal. Like if you can, and again, like if you can see problems as not being problems, it's just things you have to do.
Yeah.
Normal thing you got to do. But then you're kind of achieve that satisfaction.
Yeah. And then I hope that we all get to a point the problems we're solving are bigger problems and problems that actually benefits the world and other people, right? Because there's also different kinds of problem in the company that you're in different problems you have to solve as an entrepreneur. Some are little, some are big.
Yeah.
But hopefully we solve up to, if all we all end up solving big problems that benefit humanity, right? And how great would that be?
It would, but I still think there's going to be the entrepreneur who creates the Snuggie and is going to make money doing that, which
sure.
I guess that contributes to humanity, keeps everybody warm and cozy. Obviously there's some value it offers ads because someone's buying it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what we aspire. We aspire to. I think entrepreneurs are never done because like they're always looking for the next problem to solve, and that's kind of the thrill of the chase, but also the madness of all of it, which is why we talk about these things.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, no, that was good. I think that was really interesting discussion. I think I thought this was interesting, and we thought about talking about this because there were so many reactions to that clip.
Yeah.
And then another podcast, the All In podcast that we listened to, they had a lot of things to say and some really interesting thoughts that, really resonated with me. So, I hope you all found this interesting and that, if you have any thoughts about resilience, I'd love to hear them. Even if you're telling me that we're both full of crap for putting this out there, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on how you think about this topic.
Yeah. And don't forget to follow us and subscribe to this podcast if you found this episode of this podcast helpful.